Hello Raiders, this is Ezra, and welcome back to my Deliana account, Bastion. It has been almost a month since I made a video. I'm really sorry for that, for those people that like my content. Just life has been super crazy and I've been traveling a lot, so I really haven't had time to do a whole lot of this. The good news here is, while it has been a lot of calendar time, when you look at my actual login time, it's only been 10 account days, so you haven't missed necessarily as much as you would have thought in that time, because I really just honestly haven't been playing a whole lot. So I'm gonna give a bit of an update and make sure that we document progress a fair amount. Let's start by looking at my champions. Kyle has been level 60. He has been for some time. War Maiden is now ranked up and ascended to 6 stars. I don't necessarily have a banner for her yet, but that's certainly one of the priorities to do so she can conquer more content. Deliana remains at level 50. She will probably be the next 6-star on the account. And then we finished the Broad Malfusion, both for the purpose of getting a usable Void champion, as well as, he is now a Reviver and Crowd Controller on several of my teams. At this point, between those champions and High Katoon, who you get for a 30-day login, I think this is a team that is capable of, propelling an account like this, where you can guarantee you get your champions, through a significant portion of the game. If we look at some of my other progress, primarily, come on, advertisement, get out of the way, primarily in the Dragons dungeon, we'll see that this team with the gear I have and the champions partially leveled can clear dungeon level 13 in about 2 minutes. And this is important because this is the lowest level where you can get 6-star gear, so you have a chance of getting gear that you will literally use for the rest of the game. As well as, I assert if you can do this, it puts you on a springboard to get to dungeon level 20, which is really the next big horizon goal in the account, where you only get 5- and 6-star gear, and that really accelerates the progress of your account. So I think the next immediate term steps here are level up that team, and then spend some time in Minotaur farming masteries, making sure you get War Master or Giant Slayer as is appropriate on every champion. With the team I have here, I can do level 14. It's not necessarily as fast as I want. We'll start with level 15 soon, and that's really as fast as anyone in the game in terms of the number of runs required. Of course, the time is low, so it's an overnight farming exercise. But again, the account is set up so at this point, regular content in the game is very, very achievable. The next thing I want to talk a little bit about is what has been much, much more difficult than I imagined on this account, and that is faction wars. I think when I started this and the idea of you would only use champions that I guarantee every account can have, I really underestimated how difficult faction wars would be. I certainly expected that I wouldn't be able to get probably beyond level 7 or 10 in most of the crypts. The problem is, I think here is a good example of why this is super difficult. Let's look in Ogren tribes as an example. It's difficult for me to even do level 1 for some of these crypts because of the low number and variety of champions available, as well as, in this case, it's a matter of I haven't spent any time on, I think this is Rocktooth. I did intentionally farm him from the campaign because he has a heal reduction that I use in, here we go, that I use in the Spirit Affinity Potion Dungeon to defeat the the heal of the boss. And this is really, especially when you get to higher levels, a requirement. So on one hand, I'm super thrilled that Plarium gives you the champions required to beat basic level content by doing basic level stuff. I think the problem is that many of these things haven't really kept up with some of the new game inventions. And by that, I mean primarily dwarves and shadowkins. You can really only get these champions by pulling shards, with the exception of, I think there is like 1 or 2 uncommon shadowkins and very few dwarves. Let's actually go back and look at the index so I can make sure I'm giving good information. Let's scroll down here. So I recently got some manner of shadowkin. Right, I mean, you're limited here to Infiltrator and Conscript, neither of whom are really good, and even on an account like this, building these just to bang out faction wars seems a bit of a stretch. I think, limiting yourself to rare champions, which are easy to get, or maybe even if you look into even some of the lower tier epics, it makes a huge difference in your ability to do things like faction crypts, which obviously isn't required because it hasn't always been in the game, but makes the game so much easier just from the perspective of glyphs and forge materials. Looking back at the dwarves, at least there is a variety of dwarves available across several different affinities. But yeah, none of these are really anything you want to put time in. That's where like Sacred Order is such a great faction, because of Armiger, who is an uncommon that is awesome, that can help with a lot of content. And then I think one of the last other things to mention here after I clear the red dot is, even in just pulling mystery shards, you get a fair number of other champions. Like here, let's go back to Shadowkin real fast. I haven't gotten any rares here, but as we look through some of the rest of the index, you can see it's possible to get other champions that are actually super helpful in progression. Like here's a Broad Maw I got by doing the fusion, which I think he's actually a rather underrated champion. I still have him at level 50 on my main account and use him in faction wars. And Muckstalker, Skullsworn, and Flinger are all farmable via the campaign, I believe. So Lizardmen are well set up in terms of progressing in your account. Let's move on to one that is a little bit differently helped by the campaign. Like here's a good one. I managed to get an Eris who has become, super important with the Myth Air unkillable clan boss comp once you get to Mytha. But you get Eris and Avenger by farming the campaign, that's common. And then I managed to get a random Adjudicator just by pulling mystery shards. There are lots of things here. Should you manage to luck into an Apothecary, for instance, he's awesome and a half, and you can get him through a mystery shard should you want to. That helps with a lot of progression. And then rounding this out, I think that's the only other really interesting champion I have gotten by pulling mystery shards that hasn't otherwise been discussed in videos. And then, so I think the last thing to talk about is the Ultimate Death Knight free giveaway is going on. Here it's called the Ultimate Death Knight Hunt. If you're in the middle of progress, this is, I think, a really great way to fire up your account. Especially, you get some 6-star epic and legendary regen gear here, which should be really awesome for him if you manage to get something with good stats. As well as Death Knight himself seems to be a really good champion. I'm going to get him on this account. I don't know that I will use him for anything. The whole point of this really was to show how Deliana can help your account with progression, and I think that she does a lot. I've been very impressed so far with two things about Deliana. I think the first thing that I've been most impressed with is her A1, Heartstealer. Just AoE A1 can make a big difference in a lot of places, and then really the chance to place a leech. It's only 50% right now, but in theory you book her to 60% and then get some masteries up to 65%. That makes a big difference in keeping your team alive. And then the other part is Withering Scorn. Like, this was really why I thought she would be most interesting in the beginning, is the decreased resistance debuff. And, I can already see that being helpful in places like the Dragon's Den, where Kael can land buffs a lot more regularly than he can without the debuff. So I sort of intentionally not built Kael with as much accuracy as I normally would, and more focused on damage, because I always knew that I would have Withering Scorn available. Now, I will say that until this gets booked to 100% and I get enough gear on Deliana that she's significantly faster, the uptime on decreased resistance debuff, is not 100%. And I think once I get to that level, it'll make, a much bigger difference, especially on places like Clan Boss, where, it's often your plan to outspeed him, so it's much easier to keep up all the time. The fact that it is single target means she's not as helpful when it comes to clearing waves, however. So especially like trying to get through dungeons, this isn't as impactful as I thought it would be, especially when it comes to AoEs or similar. So overall, I have been super impressed, and especially again when it comes to bosses, but not as much of a wave clear as I thought. I also say looker gear, it's mostly terrible. I think the next step to be is get 5-star either accuracy or other set pieces that give her more of a defensive bonus, so she's more survivable, and get them all the way rolled up to 16. And I would expect to see even more of an improvement, but she is where she is with the gear that this account doesn't farm a whole lot right now. So with that, I just wanted to say, thank you all for watching. It's been quite some time since I did a video, but hopefully you'll find this sort of big omnibus update helpful, and I'll try to be better about making more updates in the future. Thanks so much for your time. We'll talk to you soon.